Chapter 30 brought one of the most wild killers to ever come to Dead by Daylight. Chucky, or as the game calls him, the good guy. The psychopathic doll murderer from the hit franchise Child's Play came to Dead by Daylight, and ever since his inception, he has been one of the most controversial killers in the entire game. Many people saying they can't stand playing against him, they hate playing against him, they think he's unhealthy for the game, they think mechanically he's not good, they think a lot of things, a lot of bad things, including some more prominent Dead by Daylight creators saying things like his skill floor and skill ceiling are both incredibly low. Now, I don't play Chucky or even interact with the killer that often. So in the hopes of trying to get to the bottom of this situation, I brought on 3 content creators who all main Chucky to ask them various questions about Chucky and how they feel the character is in the state of the game. I hope you guys enjoyed the conversation. Leave your thoughts down below, and I'll see you guys in the next one. So we'll just start with Banette, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hi everybody, I'm the TheFakeBanette. I am a Dead by Daylight streamer and YouTuber. I main Chucky religiously. I am about to hit P100. I make guides. I do some gameplay videos for it, as well as my Killer Main interview series, where I bring on people similar to this and talk about each specific killer.
Okay, Levi?
Yeah, I'm Ghost Anonymous. I used to main Xeno, used to be in the top 10. Swapped over to Chucky the moment we heard about him. I think I'm just under 1,000 hours on the character already. Struggle playing him on stream all the time for other people's enjoyment, and sometimes make the occasional YouTube content.
All right, and Ash?
Hello, my name is Ash. I stream Dead by Daylight a bunch. I used to be a survivor main, but Tiffany actually turned me into a killer main, I would say. And yeah.
I too enjoy playing the doll with tits. So,
she's more than that.
So, like I will have said in the intro to the YouTube video, I brought the 3 of you together to talk about Chucky because it turns out that he is actually quite a controversial character within the community. So, I will have little to no input during this entire thing, so people who tune in for my luxurious voice, you'll have to jack off to a different video. But I wanted to start off with the question of where does everybody think that Chucky lies at in terms of power and health for the game?
Do you mean like a tier list ranking, or do you just mean in general?
However you want to describe it.
I mean, I was talking to somebody earlier about this. I think the people saying he is top 3 are out of their minds. I would put him top 6 on a good day. I think Chucky is in this weird spot power-wise where, similar to a lot of the, I would say the top A-tier killers like Deathslinger or not top, but the A-tier killers of like Deathslinger, Plague, Oni, all of them, I would say he's at a spot where determining who is stronger than who comes down to nitpicking and semantics. There's a lot of situations where it comes down to the build you're running, the map you are, the players you're going against, and it just makes it very hard to determine. But I don't agree with the sentiment that he's like top 3 or top 5.
Yeah, I kind of agree, and I come from a fighting game background, and I think Chucky falls into what I always call a gimmick character. I think a lot of his strength is given to him based on how much the survivor side lets him have. I think Chuck spots are a really good example, right? A Chuck spot, if you hold a Chuck spot, you really can't do anything with it unless the survivor moves. So if they just hold their check spot themselves, you're just taking away from the killer's time. The survivors are not on a time limit. The killer is. And if you just stand still, that Chuck spot doesn't do anything. And there's a lot of aspects about Chucky that just kind of go out the window if the survivor just plays correctly against him, which is hard to know. The knowledge on how to play against Chucky isn't widespread. But the moment a survivor understands how he works and plays against him correctly, a lot of that strength just kind of goes right out the window. So I think he's still, like Banette said, like top 6, but I don't think he's anywhere near the top 3.
It's kind of rough to judge too, because I don't know about you guys, but I feel like when I play, I have a lot of survivors that kind of like give up, or at least like you could tell they're not trying. So it's a little bit difficult. Plus I'm not like really knowledgeable on every single killer, I would say top 6 is fair. I think the recent buffs definitely brought him way up, but before, people kind of like still put him in the same spot or like close to the same spot, and I really did not agree with that. But now I agree he's way stronger because of that cooldown. But like you said, it kind of depends on a lot of factors.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
you're good.
no,
Go on, bud.
I was gonna say, I think the DCing thing, I don't see it too often, and oddly enough, the other day I actually had someone DC the moment they heard my terror radius, and they came into my chat and were like, I DC'd the moment I knew it was Chucky. I don't like playing against Chucky. That's all they said in my chat, and they left. That was it.
Yeah, it's kind of it's interesting because there's a few factors, right? Like I've talked it before. I think rat poison makes a huge difference. I think Chucky with and without rat poison is almost a completely different game in terms of like power level. And I don't think it's bad. Like I don't mind people using rat poison, but I think if you're like determining the character, that one add-on changes a lot. But yeah,
it's kind of like I put it very similar to Clown with like Cigar Box.
Yeah,
that one add-on changes how that character plays completely to the point to where if the whole team isn't running distortion, he can just do what he wants.
Do you guys use rat poison a lot? Because I feel like that might be where we differ too. Like, I literally just abuse the fuck out of it and I don't care. But I feel like you guys, at least Ghost, like, you guys try to challenge yourselves a little bit more.
Oh,
You can
definitely.
blame Kaiser. I use Silk Pillow most of the time.
Yeah, I mean,
God.
that's where I kind of have a weird perspective because, I mean, I played Chucky 100% scamperless since release. So I've always been somebody that likes to adopt, like, weird challenges. Fuck, I dance in the middle of my matches. That's why, I don't mind if other people use it. And I actually think it's really good. He has a really weird base kit that doesn't really work with other perks very well. I mean, you're not really going to get M1 downs. Usually it's going to be the M2, so he doesn't work with being exposed or a bunch of other M1 perks like Surge or Jolt, whatever you want to call it now. And honestly, even with aura reading, he just doesn't mix well. Generally, you don't want to kick gens because you need to spend your time in chase anytime you're taking it away and walking to a gen and then trying to walk back slowly. It's just way more time than a regular killer, so nowhere to hide doesn't work well. And so I think rat poison really shores up a lot of those shortcomings, and it's a really nice addition. I just wish I had like a slight change, but other than that, yeah.
I don't typically use rat poison these days. I mean, I have, like, right now I have the game opened. I have my best build pulled up. It has rat poison in it. Like, I'm aware of its strength and I use it from time to time, but me not using it isn't so much me trying to like challenge myself. It's more so just for the variety's sake, honestly.
Right.
But I mean, the acknowledgement of it being his best add-on, I do think the fact that his best add-on without a doubt is rat poison. The fact that it's a green, I mean, I've got 1,000 of them. Like, I could use them for 1,000 matches and get more from the blood web while I'm doing it. There's nothing stopping me.
Yeah, it's gotten to the point I've played matches of Chucky and people have yelled at me for rat poison at the end game chat without me even having it equipped. So I think a lot of people are very aware of that add-on at this point, and so even not using it, you'll still get hate for using it, which is beyond hilarious to me. But yeah, I've seen a lot of people talk about giving up the moment they see Chucky, and I've had quite a few in my matches. I have to generally go through, I think, maybe 3 to 4 Chucky matches before I get one where they just don't give up at like 4 gens or something like that really early on.
It does too much. Like, it's such a simple effect, but it does too much.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, go.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I mean, I agree with it. I see it. Of course, I'm biased because that's like literally all I used since release. But I don't really like care to win my matches, if that makes sense. Like, you guys watch me, like, I always try to go for the most ridiculous, like, slice and dice. It doesn't matter if it's possible or not. Like, I will try to go for it. Also, when I'm streaming, like, it's a little bit hard for me to pay attention to the audio because you gotta pinpoint the survivor exactly, which is why it is kind of like a little bit of a brainless add-on for sure, because I don't have to actually like pay attention using it, but that's why I use it at least. I haven't had anyone complain about it specifically, but I also run like aura builds, so I get complaints on that.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you're going to get complaints on either side, no matter what you run. So it's really a small factor of it. But yeah, I think
I once had somebody tell me that I was running a pay-to-win perk because I had monitor and abuse.
I had the long rants of somebody who said I was playing a pay-to-win character because I brought Xenomorph into a match.
Yeah. So what do you guys think in terms of like game health that Chucky brings to? Do you think that his design is inherently unhealthy and needs some sort of change to make it better to play against? And when I say unhealthy, I don't mean like he's overly oppressive like the nurse. I mean like in terms of like player enjoyment in general, because we mentioned a lot of disconnects that could happen, or people just giving up, like even if it's morally, like Ash said, you can kind of tell that they're just like not trying as hard as they normally would.
Right.
Do you guys think that that's a lack of player knowledge, or do you think that that's a problem with his inherent design?
Well, it's actually. Oh, sorry.
No, go
It's
ahead.
I actually think Chucky might be, and it'll be interesting to hear your perspective, but I think he's one of the healthiest killers so far in terms of accessibility at the very least, because he gets closed captioning for almost any action that happens in game. From what I understand, there's not really any sign when you're going in and out of chase. If you're hard of hearing, it's all sound effect based, which is actually a really important aspect when you're playing killer, because you might not always notice a survivor, but you can notice when you engage a chase, and that'll help alert you that somebody's nearby. And if you can't hear anything, Chucky actually has specific voice lines for those kind of things that you can read on screen. The only change I think he still needs is when he starts his dash, his little yell. If you added closed captioning to that, he'd be perfectly playable on the survivor side for the hard of hearing too. So I think he adds a lot of really healthy elements that we haven't had before. And I think his counterplay pretty much exists. I think Scamper was really unhealthy with some of the options in the way some people played it. But outside of that, almost every option he has, there's equal counterplay. It's just a matter of adjusting. Similar to like Xeno and his turrets, when people really didn't want to deal with the turrets when he first released.
I'm going to sound insane when I say this, but let me finish. Chucky, in my opinion, is similar to Hag. And what I mean by that is Hag is what I consider an anti-killer. She's a killer that does everything a killer shouldn't do. She's not supposed to chase. She's supposed to set her traps up, let the survivors walk into them, and then hit them that way. In general, that's what she's supposed to do. Someone's going to tell me, oh, well, you can just run Marta Shoe or something like that. Anyways, but Chucky being 110 and as short as he is, with his dash that has the 90-degree limit, means that a lot of the loops and situations he's bad in are ones that other killers would normally thrive in. Junk loops are the ones I always bring up. Random rocks around the map. Those things like that are things that Chucky cannot deal with unless he just brute forces it. If you find like a junk loop, like one on Macmillan, where it's like just a barrel and a pallet and then like two other barrels on the other side or something like that, Chucky cannot do anything on that pallet or that loop at all. All he can do, especially now that Manual Scamper's gone, all he can do is just run around it and hope. You can't flick around the barrels if the survivor just holds W around it. You can't mind game it because you can see him over the barrels, and he's 110, so you can loop it for longer than you can with every other killer. The same, and then for loops like Shaq and such, you need to take the loops wider. That way, the slice and dice doesn't, or it has. That way, Chucky's Slice and Dice has more options for you to dodge, which means that he's more likely to miss. Will he miss? That's a whole other discussion I'm sure we'll get into later. But the thing with the health aspect, because similar to Victor's short size, Chucky is very hard to see. But Behavior has implemented the footsteps that show up in 16 meters when he's nearby to make him easier to see. If you would normally see another killer, you would normally see his footsteps, which linger a bit, which was, I assume, their way of making it so you couldn't get a pinpoint location on him. When he's undetectable, they even gave him the laugh within 12 meters. It's a directional laugh. Now, I understand hard of hearing. There should be something to help the hard of hearing with that. But as it is now, I think it's hard to say whether or not I think he's actually healthily designed. I think the biggest issue is that a lot of the things that would make him healthier are just, they would get rid of the character as a whole. You can't make him taller, because then it's not Chucky. You can't make him first person. That would just be miserable to play. You can't... as far as the actual power itself, while I do think I would be fine with them reverting the cooldown change back to 12 seconds, I don't think that solves the issue many people have for him. And I think no matter what they do to this character, even if they made the cooldown 30 seconds at base with no way to lower it for whatever reason, people still wouldn't enjoy going against this character. Just because of how hard he is to see.
Yeah,
that's what I was going to touch on, like, enjoyment level. Like, no one agreed with me at first, but it's cool to hear you guys say that, because I always said, like, I didn't care, because I loved 180s. I didn't care about any of that, like the slice and dice, whatever, because a lot of people don't like that. But my main thing when going against a Chucky is how short he is and how much attention you have to pay to him at all times. And especially because I only play Dead by Daylight when I'm streaming. I have music on, I have all this stuff going. Like, I'm not trying to squint and see his like little footsteps and pay attention to the audio. That's why I don't like going against Spirit as well. I'm more of a like casual player, obviously, but I think that is his biggest thing when it comes to enjoyment. Like, I don't know, I don't enjoy that at all. Health-wise, like you said, I don't really know what they could do to make him better, because I understand too, you can't really fix how tall he is. And I also abuse that as well. Like, mind games are honestly really easy for me to win on Tiffany. But what I like used to ask for was to bring back no capped slice and dices. I'm fine with like 120 degrees. Some people threw out different numbers, but my 180s were so fun. I did want manual scamper to go away. I didn't care about that. And then I wanted a cooldown reduction. But now I'm definitely seeing the frustration with the current cooldown, because he is pretty spammy. It is decently easy to two-tap survivors now, especially if no one knows how to go against Chucky. And that was another problem as well. Nobody really knew how to go against him, because he does have a lot of counterplay at the end of the day that could really, really mess him over. And then like once you do one thing to counterplay his slice and dice, you get so much distance. Not so much anymore because of his cooldown, but they would just W key and that would be that. Like, you would waste so much time. But I feel like he's in this like really weird spot right now where it's like, I don't really know how they could fix him for survivor enjoyment, you know?
Yeah, I like the thing you brought up. He does take attention. And I think, you know, like I come from a competitive background in gaming, which that's fine. I like things that, you know, take attention and thinking and being involved. But if you want to like chill out, he really is not built for that. You have to listen, so you can't really have music. You have to pay attention, so it's hard to read chat. Like, playing him offline versus playing against him on stream is two completely separate experiences, and I think that's valid. That's totally fair. I understand that. But at the end of the day, I don't know if that like leans into, is the game unhealthy because it doesn't let you play it passively? I think that leads into, is Dead by Daylight a competitive or a casual game, you know?
Yeah.
I feel like Chucky's at this weird balance point of that where he kind of gets vortexed into that problem.
Yeah, and another thing with that a little bit, with the whole paying attention thing, I think I brought up how Chucky's kind of like an anti-killer. I think another thing with it, a lot of Chuck spots, I tell people this all the time, if you look forward where he's at, you'll see his footsteps. You'll just see him sitting there.
Yeah.
But most survivors are conditioned to look behind them in a loop, because that's what every other killer does. They chase right behind you. Chucky tries to cut you off a lot. And
well, yeah. Go on, sorry.
I was just going to say, I think having a killer that kind of messes with that muscle memory for their counterplay a little bit can be very, very annoying to go against.
Well, yeah, I mained Xeno before, and when I mained him and he first came out, I had a lot of the same complaints of he doesn't play like the rest of the killers. You can't really loop him. You got to deal with this other thing. Like you have to play completely different. And I was like, and I always argued that that's really cool. If you played against every killer the same way, this game would get really boring really fast. We already have 30 something killers that all relatively you chase the same way, more or less, with minor changes. And I think Chucky's kind of the same way. I think if you're focusing on how to counter in the micro game, which is fine, you can. There's a lot of counters in the micro game, but there's so much in the macro game, like splitting up. People never talk about how he's like Legion, where if you split up, that's a huge counter. Pre-running from generators is hugely good against him. Yeah. That shit sucks. When they just start hearing your terror radius, and you can already see them running away, and you're like, fuck, do I use my power to just barely catch up and then run around as 110 for 10 seconends, get my power, hit him? Like, you could turn that into a 30-second chase easy without really doing anything. And there's a... Oh, go on.
I was going to say, in the sense of part of his power that I do think should be looked at a little bit more, I do think he's a little bit not punished enough when he misses.
You're talking about his cooldown?
Yeah, I think... Well, not even the cooldown, the recovery.
Yeah, the recovery. Sorry, my bad.
Yeah,
I agree.
I think the fact that at base, I'm fine with it on the add-ons, but at base, the fact that you can just kind of use slice and dice for mobility in general is nice. But the fact that I can I can miss a slice and dice, get right beside a survivor, and basically still guarantee an M1 almost immediately after.
I'll go on. The one counterpoint is the collision is so bad. I think that would ruin the character. Like I know I've seen it in Ash. Me and Ash have talked about it a ton of times, but they're just like invisible walls. It's not always you're hitting a wall or a door frame. They're just legit bad collision for him. Like RPD's a fucking nightmare.
I forgot to bring that up. I wanted to say that too. I battle the collision all the time. It is horrible, and until they look at that, I don't really know about changing the recovery. But also, that is true. What you're saying, like, it's kind of fast.
Yeah, it is, right? And I have this technique I call putting baby in a corner, where a lot of times survivors will try to like duck into a corner, and I know I can't reach them, but I know that's where they're going, so I'll purposely fail my slice and dice, so now I can body block them into that corner, and I can usually get a hit before they can escape around me, and that's pretty nasty. So I could see that going up, but I would want collision fixed. And I mean, I play Xeno and Huntress all the time, and I have maybe 1/10 of the collision issues with them than I do Chucky. I hope Brand doesn't kill me for saying that, but it's horrible. I think I have maybe, I don't know, 2 to 3 collision issues per match.
There's just really weird auto aim too. Like there's a collision where it's like, okay, that's literally an invisible wall. But then there's other times when I'm like kind of using my slice and dice for mobility. And like I use jump rope like 24/7. And so I know how long my slice and dice is, but I always end up like auto aiming a wall or something, and it'll cut it short, and then I have to make up that distance that I lost. Essentially, again, it's still better with the current cooldown, but before that, it was so frustrating.
Yeah, and it's hard because if you take any of these tools away, Chucky is like on this really fine line of being extremely strong, like he is, to being like very bottom tier, right? Like it would take one of these little additions he has, and all of a sudden he really wouldn't. If you're going to take away his ability for the fast recovery, that closes out a bunch of options. If you up his cooldown time, I mean, we're starting to get into a territory where even little mistakes kind of really start holding him back.
I feel like that's a solution that add-ons, and I know people don't like add-ons fixing problems, but it's like, if you want to use a slice and dice for mobility, I wouldn't have a problem with if you that forces you to bring one of the other add-ons.
I agree. That's fair. That's a good point.
Like if they upped what is it, carving knife? Yeah, carving knife. If they upped carving knife's cooldown to like 10%, but they made his base recovery worse, I actually wouldn't mind that, because that means like when I go into a match and I know I'm burning a build where I want slice and dice to be primarily a mobility tool, I can bring that add-on in. I still do that now, but it would be more of a reliance on it, which once again, I know people aren't the biggest fan of, but I think in terms of health, sometimes it can be the better option. Similar to like Hillbilly with low pros, I think is another good example of that. Where
I mean, low pro is crazy. I think it's funny we live in a world where scamper was kind of seen as a problem, but we still have low pro where effectively it does the same thing, right? If you scampered, you just go right under, invalidate the pallet and get a hit. Low pro does the same. I mean, I can't tell you the times I've watched like Numi or somebody doing their win streak and they'll like follow somebody, they'll just drop a pallet and they just insta low pro through it and get the hit as if the like within the same second, just a few frames later. And I'm like, that's like scamper on drugs. It's insane.
Yeah, low pro is probably a bad example, to be honest.
Yeah, I was like, low pro might be one of the worst designed ones.
I'm trying to think of another good. Well, like Huntress reload speed add-ons.
Oh yeah, no, that's a
like
good
something
one.
like that. Like they could, in theory, they just make Huntress's reload speed faster. They could, but if you really want her reload speed faster, I think what it is now is actually okay. But if you want that faster reload, you can just bring the add-on to fix that problem you have with her.
I just want to point out that if you wanted to stick with Billy, he has bump recovery add-ons, Banette, which are basically the same thing.
Oh, that is true. Yeah, fair. Yeah, exactly.
See?
Yeah,
there's something there. Yeah,
there you go.
So a lot of talk about like the way people view the character is basically what sparked this whole thing. So we've talked about health, we've talked about power level. Do you guys think that there's an overall lack of player knowledge about how to play against him? And if so, how do you think we could fix that problem? Do you think there's something to be fixed with him? Or is it just literally like similar to Vecna, where it's a case of people like, or Skull Merchant's a better example, where people just like refuse to learn the counterplay, refuse to learn how to play against the character. And so when the character enters, they just throw their hands up, go, fuck it, hate this shit. And then we lead to this like overabundance of complaining about a character who, from what I'm listening to, does have a lot of counterplay, and if you implement that counterplay, it makes him vastly easier to deal with.
I think it's sorry. I know you guys probably have so much, so I just want to jump in here. I think it's mainly the fact, like, I don't know how to bring this knowledge to people, because to me, it was a lot of stuff that I just learned through playing the character repeatedly. So for example, the biggest thing is when I am scampering like shack window, if you go left, well, I guess it depends on how you're looking, but if you go a certain way, either left or right out of the shack door, like one way is a guaranteed hit for me, and then the other way is like 100%. I will never get that hit with how he is currently. And like, that's just from my experience playing him. And that goes with a lot of things. Like after a while, I kind of just know like what I could hit and what I can't. And I don't think a good solution to learning how to play against a killer is, you know, buying him and playing him. It sucks that you would have to buy the character to really get that counterplay knowledge. So I don't know if there's any other ways. I'm sure you guys have ways, so I would love to hear that. But yeah, that's my 2 cents.
I think, and like no disrespect to anybody, but like there's a stunning lack of good content, like namely on YouTube for Chucky. I think Banette might be the only one turning out any good content that I've seen. Most everybody else is showing like, oh, look at this like silly build with rat poison. I'm just gonna like dominate real fast and show how crazy he is, and that's like it. Right. And there is a lot of counterplay, but a lot of it is counterintuitive. No pun intended. For, like most killers, if you're at a wall loop, right, with a pallet in the middle, you're always going to try and loop the long wall. And that's like exactly what Chucky wants to do. He's really bad at short walls. So you have to play the inverse. And that's like a simple concept. Like you could easily put that in a video and, you know, mention that and people could start interpreting that. And there's a few things like that, but I've not seen a counterplay video. I've talked to Banette about possibly making one, because there's just no information out there, and you shouldn't have to pay however much money it is wherever you live to play Chucky, because even if you buy the character, you have to play them, right? It's not like you can just load up a custom game and have the bot take over as the killer and practice and lab against them. Even fighting games, if you want to play, usually the way to do it is you lab against them, you have the CPU take over and you just practice. Dead by Daylight doesn't have anything like that. And with how many killers there are and how many we're probably going to get if the game keeps going, they need to either introduce a way to do that, or they need like a whole page describing how to play against them for each one, something.
I think, I mean, I mentioned it earlier how I consider Chucky like an anti-killer similar to Hag, and I think because I have played him enough that I know which loops I can't play, right? I think one of the biggest examples, and this is most killers, but if you really want to waste a Chucky's time on Cornfield, go to Cow Tree. Pallet up or down, he can't do anything on that loop. You can see him the entire time. He can't really scamper the windows and get a good hit because of how the loop is designed in like 2 U shapes, so he can't really flick after the window or anything like that. Even once the pallet's broken, it's just it's not a good time for him. A lot of the waiting is something very good survivors do. They'll wait around a corner. However, like I said earlier, with the whole holding loops wide, that is something that even good survivors forget to do at times. They'll hold their check spots super close. And I've played him enough that I know, like, if I'm on the non-pallet window or non-pallet door of Shack on the window side and I'm holding my camera there and looking at them, if they stop moving and just stand there holding their check spot, I know that if I charge my slice and dice 0.25 seconds after I start walking, I can just slide the corner and hit them before they hit the door. If they're holding it wide, I can't do that. Right? Yeah. But I know that because I played him for like 1,000 matches, right? I don't expect everyone to just know that, and there's no real way. There's no real way to learn that without playing against him or playing as him. And you know, even playing as him, like we mentioned, the problem of you have to buy him and then you have to play him a bunch. But even playing against him, it's like you can't pick your killer.
Yeah.
So that runs into the issue there. And then the whole counterintuitive gameplay that Chucky requires to play against him doesn't help either, because how do you realistically practice doing the opposite of what you do for most of the cast, right?
Yeah, like camera control, right? Like you were mentioning earlier, a lot of times you're gonna like watch behind you, and I've talked about how like it's not like he doesn't have a body, right? Like when Spirit is chasing you, they physically don't have a physical body. There's nothing to see. You have just sound. Chucky at least has that body. It just takes like manipulating the camera a little bit differently, and even that's really hard muscle memory for a lot of people to break. I've heard tons of survivors say they have a hard time panning the camera down while they're chasing to keep a better eye on him.
Well, that was the whole point of the footsteps, though.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree with you there. I don't think he's that hard to follow, but I also play the character for hundreds of hours. So
can I be honest?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how to play against the footsteps. I just run away. Like I'm so casual. Like I am one of those people. Like I could see his footsteps and like I know if he's holding a chuck spot and stuff just because of my general knowledge. But I'm like I'm having a hard time following your footsteps, or like, and I don't care enough to. I don't know. It's kind of because, again, I just play so casual. I got my music going, whatever, which I'm not saying that's a good excuse or a bad excuse, or like, I don't want to touch that part of the game, like comp versus casual player. Like, that's just how I play. But yeah, I don't follow the footsteps too well, I'll be honest, even though I play the character.
No, I think they're very small, and they're also white. So if you're playing like on Ormond, they can tend to bleed in. I think they should be red. Every tracking feature in the game is red. I don't know why the footsteps should be any different. They'd stand out a bit more.
It's thematic. It looks like the movie.
They should be red, and then they could probably increase the size a tiny bit.
I don't think they should linger.
I don't either. I think they should be pinpoint.
Yes,
it's the
that
same
would
as
help me so much.
Because the whole point is, hey, if you would see a regular killer, you see the footprints. Cool. So why are they lingered? Because the whole thing is to help them if they would have seen a regular killer, and the regular killer would not be lingered. So why are the footsteps? It kind of defeats the point a little bit. So that's fair. I think it's silly they're lingered. They should be pretty much 1-to-1.
Mm-hmm. I also think that the detection, because you've seen the video. I did like 2 hours of testing on the actual logic of it. It is really dumb that if the camera isn't in like the perfect spot, which some could argue is like a good way to do it, but it's like, for those who don't know how it works, it's when you're within 16 meters of Chucky, he is as tall as a survivor. Just imagine that. And if he can lock eyes with you and you lock eyes with him, as if he was that tall, the footsteps spawn. That's how it works.
We might want to test it. I was actually getting footage for my guide, and it triggered way in a wider range than it used to. So me and you need to actually pull that up because I think they've adjusted it.
Great. Great.
It's more forgiving now, but I just don't know the limits.
Yeah, I'm sure it's one of those things like Nemesis zombie AI that they look at behind the scenes and don't really tell any of us.
Props.
Small indie company, they can't put changes in the patch notes. So the biggest discussion, the biggest part that came in around this whole thing and what caused me to bring the three of you together was I'm not going to say controversial because I don't really think Dave was or Dav or however you pronounce his fucking name was trying to be controversial with it, but a tweet from Davood, otherwise known as Look at My Feet, because
the goat,
he's like that, pretty much sparked this whole gigantic debate on Twitter about the skill floor versus skill ceiling of Chucky. Now, this is where I'm going to talk for a little bit longer than I planned on, but to get everybody who's watching up to speed and to make sure all of us are on the same page, skill floor and skill ceiling refer to value versus skill expression of a character. The skill floor is how much value you can get out of the character, or the skill floor is how good you need to be at the character to get the minimum amount of value out of the character's kit. So for Chucky, for example, I personally put his skill floor at a kind of not low, but not medium size, because it doesn't take much to understand that you can just right click dash, and possibly get a hit on someone moving in a straight line. So you get a bare minimum value. The skill ceiling is the maximum amount of value a character's kit can provide, regardless of how many hours you put into it. So for Chucky, I don't know where his skill ceiling lies because I don't fucking play the character, but a great example in this game is somebody like Trapper, for example, who you could have 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 hours in Trapper, and you're still not going to get that much value out of his kit because it's just place trap, hope they step into trap. So the discussion normally actually actively seems to be not necessarily skill floor versus skill ceiling, but mechanics floor versus mechanics ceiling. So the question that I have, or the topic that I have for the three of you, is where do you think the skill floor and skill ceilings lie? And do you agree with the character getting far too much value, or how easy they are to use, quote unquote?
Yeah, I'd say the floor and the ceiling are a bit lower than I would like. And I'll admit, but a part of that is the fact that nobody knows the counterplay or enacts it. And that, if I have a knife and I'm going to attack you and you don't try to defend yourself, even though I don't know how to use a knife, it's going to do damage. And I think that's a big part. I couldn't tell you the amount of times people vault the window and then run straight. And I'm like, I can vault that and I just keep going straight. That it's horrible. But if they took literally just turned left, there's nothing I can do. So I think the skill floor only feels so powerful because a lot of survivors kind of let it be, if that makes sense. Skill ceiling without the 180s or scancels, a lot of it's sadly been removed. And I kind of wish we'd get something like Ash was saying. I think 120 degrees would be enough. I think 180 eliminates a lot of mistakes he makes during slice and dices. You can kind of correct whatever mistakes you make. So I don't think I want it that far. But I mean, there's so much you can do. Me versus another Chucky, they might not know what windows and pallets they can chain together with their distance exactly. I have a pretty good sense. I think a lot of beginner Chuckies probably have a really hard time slice and dicing through doorways because the door frames magnetize his hitbox. Being able to drop with the slice and dice and charge without it making sound. I mean, there's so much you can do. The putting baby in a corner tech, there's a lot you can gain, and I'm still constantly learning. So I think the skill ceiling's higher than some people would like to think, and you get a lot of value out of all of those things. So I'd say it's quite higher than people think. But mechanically, yeah, it's easy to hit second button and go.
Ash.
I don't know. I'm kind of torn on this. I think it's because of my underlying sadness about the 180s being removed, but I also think that's kind of where that tweet came from. Because I rated, is it David Dav? I rated him that day, and I was giving him some tricks, and Bestie was struggling a little bit at first. Like, there is a lot of things that could fuck you over if you don't play him. You could do absolutely terrible, and I know that's kind of like most killers, but the 90-degree lock is where the not problem lies, but that's kind of like my gray area, if that makes sense. Like, and then also what you were saying about survivors counterplay, like a lot of survivors will just run straight after you are actively slice and dicing. Like, they don't try to, literally, if you just turn left after a scamper, like, your life would be so much better. But then that comes in, that's where like the skill ceiling kind of comes, because then I know, okay, and only PC players could do this, I'm pretty sure, but if you are looking down after a scamper, you could kind of like ride the wall behind you, and then you could last second flick if that wall is like long enough to keep that survivor,
Yeah. Usually only on those long walls, yeah.
Yeah, and there's so many little things, like you said. That's why it's like, I don't really know where to put it. I would say his floor is a little bit higher than people give credit for, but I think people also put his ceiling a little bit too low, because I think they mainly care about all the flashy stuff. So like 180s, like my Chucky clips aren't that sick anymore, simply because there's like not a lot of cool stuff to do with him, at least to people that don't play Chucky. Like, it doesn't look cool to them, but then, like, for example, Ghost, you know how hard certain things are, but it kind of doesn't look as hard as it is, if that makes sense.
No, I couldn't tell you the amount of times I did like a 5-chain scamper through windows and pallets, blind with no rat poison, and landed like the perfect back shot. And I'm like freaking out, about to do a touchdown dance, and chat's like snoozing. Not realizing how cool that shit was. I'm like, no, you don't get it. It's cool, okay? That shit's hard. But yeah, then I'll play Xenomorph and I'll like get a very easy tail shot at something like, oh my god! He just doesn't have that same flash appeal, and so people go, oh, he's just kind of boring and simple hits. And I'm like, it's really not that, but it I don't know. You kind of, he's not a clippable killer. That's kind of what I've always said. He doesn't clip well. I mean, there's you inspired me, because you had that Shaq clip that I have been cursed with since you made it, because people would come in and be like, hey, have you seen that clip that girl made where they fly through the window on Shaq and get a hit? I'm like, yes, that's Ash. This is them. They're wonderful. Go follow them. Yeah, that you can do that. You can do it over walls. Like I've learned so many like space chuck spots now because of that. And I do them, and people like are like, oh, okay, you flew over a wall. I'm like, no, I flew over a fucking wall. What do you mean? And I'm like, yeah. So I get what you're saying.
I think floor wise, I'll talk about the floor because I'm probably going to talk about the ceiling for way too long. The floor, I think, at the end of the day, if you want to look at it in a vacuum, and this is the problem with talking about this, I feel, is if a survivor is in a dead zone, at the end of the day, Chucky is just slice and dice hit. Hope they don't dodge quick enough. And then, but at the same time, from his basics, he's an M1 killer who's 110 with no real range. So I think he, technically speaking, because of that, actually has a higher skill floor than some of the other killers. Because he can't play loops like every other killer because of that. It's like playing Huntress without hatchets. Like, or Spirit without her phase. But then again, that's kind of getting rid of the slice and dice altogether. But even then, like, at the end of the day, like, if they're on a long wall and you are chasing them and you just M2 them, like, obviously you're probably going to get the hit. There you go. So the floor, I think, is decently low, which I think is a good thing. I think most killers need not all of them, but I think the game is in a place where killers having a low skill floor is fine.
Yeah.
As far as no, go on.
Oh, I was gonna say, you hit on something important, right? Like, he's always had this really weird view about him, where people kind of have really strong reactions to what he can do, but they don't really look at the repercussions in the back end of that, right? Like if we look at Old Scamper, and I want to state before I get into this, like, I wanted it removed. I've been a big proponent, didn't really like using it myself. If you scampered a pallet and let's say even M1'd or dashed into them to get a hit, cool, you invalidated the pallet and you got a hit, but now you were stuck with an 18-second long 110 killer, and that was it. Whereas, say, Huntress, Xeno, Deathslinger in some cases can do the exact same thing, and immediately after they hit you through that pallet or window, they can do it again almost immediately. Like, Xeno gets to stay 115 and tail stab you a few seconds later. But that Scamper was seen as way stronger than any of those. I think he just suffers from that perception a bit.
Well,
but yeah, like being 110 and trying to deal with him outside of that hit, I mean, that's a guaranteed 10 seconds in the chase that are pretty easy compared to a lot of other killers. Even Nurse, I mean, is going to hit you and then probably just teleport back into you a few seconds later.
And I think the other problem in my issue with talking about skill expression and skill ceiling in general, I know Kaiser tried to give like a generalized statement on it, but I still don't. Are we just talking about the killer's power, or are we talking about as a whole? Because as a whole, like I said, he's a 110 killer with very little options of macro play, right? So is the macro play getting discussed in this situation too?
Yeah, so skill expression, something I probably should have covered, but skill expression is why I try to differentiate between mechanical floor ceilings and skill floor ceilings, is because skill expression involves things like macro sense, micro sense, game sense, predictability, adaptability, even. So like if you're chasing Ada, and you notice that she likes to take curves wide, then you understand every time you're going to go toward her that she's going to take that curve wide. But in the same exact match, you might be chasing a Nay, and that Nay likes to take curves thin. So now you have to keep both of those in mind depending on who you're chasing. A great example of this is I went against Mish on Batum as Billy. I know that Mish likes to greed pallets. So once I understood that, I played against her with the idea that she was going to greed every single pallet, whereas all of her other teammates didn't greed pallets, so that's how I played it. So when I say skill expression, I am talking literally everything that goes into this game, including your base level knowledge and how that's applied to the killer.
Well, I mean, in that case, I mean, I would say his skill expression at the very least is decently high. You have to know exactly where to put the slice and dice on every single loop. Like Shaq is a good example. Depending on where they're positioned, like, you need to know, do I scamper through the window to get the hit? If the pallet is down, it's a completely different game. If you need to know, can they make it to the left? Which part of the wall are they hugging at the moment? Do I slide here? Do I just do the normal slice and dice and just go for the 90-degree flick at the door? Or do I hug the wall, go through the door, and then hit them before they get to the window with the last second lunge?
Well, even speaking into that, right? Like, Chucky's kind of a interesting killer in the fact that he's like all in on micro, right? He's all about chase. He's really not got much else outside of that.
Mm-hmm.
So due to that, I think a lot of people are like, oh, he takes a lot of micro skill. And I'm like, actually, he takes a lot more macro skill, because I don't really need to, I mean, I do need to know all those things, right? But even outside of that, I can do somewhat okay in the micro, even as a newer Chucky. But man, if I have an efficient team that's splitting up, I better sure as shit know my macro, because I don't have the leeway in my macro game to go to the wrong gen, to pressure the wrong spot. So like, in a weird way, since he's all focused in on the micro, you have to pay that much more attention to his micro against a good team. So he ends up becoming like a back end macro important killer, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well,
so I'd say like playing him well against efficient people, a lot of the skill setting is going to be in the macro, and knowing how to, like, where to position him and where to pressure ends up becoming a big part too.
I don't know, like, if I 100% agree. I mean, I feel like all killers are like, it still will depend on your macro, right? Especially splitting gen pressure. But I noticed you guys are very not anti, but I use nowhere to hide. I use pop, and sometimes unforeseen. I mean, unforeseen is literally in his base kit. Yet I still get more value out of that than my no terror radius. But my macro in general is not the best, but I feel like I still get a lot of value. I still get a lot of kills out of my micro. And I guess I do kind of adjust to the survivor, but it really comes down to my knowledge of like how I know I should play the loop. And I could easily get punished for going for a lot of slice and dice that I go for because I just try to be flashy. But I feel like I still kind of end up by the gens that I need to kick, and I try to keep that in mind. But like, again, I play a little bit more casual, so I'm not like, okay, they're split up, like I need to drop this chase right now, I need to go to that corner, like, you know what I mean? Like, I get what you're saying, but I feel like, I don't know, I don't fully agree because I just don't play like that, and I still get decent results, I would say.
Well, I think what I was going to say with the scaling back a little bit to like the mechanical side of it is like, I think the thing, and I think this is a Dead by Daylight community problem in general. I think a lot of times the whole idea of knowledge, and that's not me trying to float my own ego, but the idea of knowing when and where to use your power is often the part that no one cares about and completely dismisses. Like, I mean, I went on like a 2-minute talk a second ago about holding a chuck spot at Shack and the two different situations I need to account for, and knowing that I know that to the second. Is that not skill expression?
No, you're right. There's a lot of like instances where I catch myself like just out of experience at the same exact loop. Like, I could just judge the distance so well. I mean, I'm not like, okay, 2.5 seconds, but I just know. I don't know how to describe it.
Yeah.
And my macro sucks, yet somehow my like micro in that aspect just carries me.
Yeah. Also, to clear up with my whole not liking pop in particular, it's not that I don't think Chucky can kick gens. I think he can kick gens just fine. I just think a lot of times, if the survivor takes you to the wrong spot aside of the map, if they're playing, quote, the correct way, I feel like you kind of had to force yourself to get the pop value, and that's why I'm not the biggest fan of it on him. I mean, my current build has nowhere to hide in it. Like, I still kick gens. It's just not necessarily. I feel like he can't often kick the gens he wants to kick. That's all. That's my whole thing on that.
Yeah, I mean,
go
on.
I was just gonna say, I feel like I used pop because I have nowhere to hide, and I used to run unforeseen like a lot, not so much anymore. And I'm like, oh, it just like pairs really, really well. But there's not really like a perfect gen regression perk for him. There's pain res, but RNG is really, really bad. And then there's nothing else, like obviously not surge. So that's kind of why I use that.
Yeah, no, I have on my strongest build, I also have pop, right? And that's what I was saying earlier, like he just has this really weird sense where like he just doesn't work well with a lot of perks like perfectly. He can still use them. And they're still like good ones for him. He just doesn't like perfectly synergize with anything. It's not like Jolt or something on like a Spirit or a Deathslinger where it works, despite them using their power. It's
But talk a little bit about the whole knowledge thing. I mean, like, a good example I bring up sometimes is Knight. Is Knight knowing how to sandwich you, or knowing when to sandwich you, is that skill expression?
Yes.
Then how is Chucky knowing how to double tap you not? I'm not saying any of y'all are saying that, but a lot of people tend to. It's like, oh, all he does is M1 you and then M2 you, and that's it.
No, I mean, I know how to play Knight, right? I have like a fucking 15, 20 prestige Knight, but like I can't play them and operate them to the same level Pixie can. Like nowhere near. I can understand basic ideas, but I'm not gonna have the same game sense and know-how and ability to apply different guards into all these different situations in the correct way
And
for that maximum efficiency.
I think it's generally what it comes down to as far as like skill expression, skill ceilings, in my opinion, is if you can see and tell the difference between a good person on that character versus someone who's playing them badly, I think that immediately right there shuts down the whole idea that a character doesn't have skill expression. Even a character like Legion, I know people bring up Legion and say, oh, they're easy, they have no skill expression. There's still skill expression there in the sense of when you M2 somebody, you have to think in your mind, okay, do I keep going with the Feral Frenzy? Do I use this information to my advantage? Okay, well now I know where all the survivors are because I'm getting the Killer Instinct procs. So now I know exactly, now the skill expression there is how do I use that information? But, I mean, the argument there could be made, well, that's every killer. But Legion does it in a different way from the other killers, which would fall into the idea of adapting and being able to mold your playstyle to that killer in specific. And I think that's where the underlying issue, and this isn't just a Chucky problem. Skull Merchant runs into it too. People say she takes no skill. But, I mean, knowing where to place your drones for the most effect they can get. I mean, Pixel Bush did an hour-and-a-half guide on double tapping and laser tacking and all these other things. Now, do you need to do all of that stuff? No, you can get general use, but that's where the skill floor is, right? The skill expression and the skill ceiling is still there. I think the real question comes down to, do people need to know that to get effective use out of the character? And I think with Chucky, I think a lot of times you really don't, but it's still there. And I think it's always been my main conceit with the whole argument. Because like I said, knowing those timings, sorry to cut you off, Kaiser.
No, you're good. I was gonna say that I feel like at the end of the day, we have a pretty good idea, because I know Banette, I know Ghost, and I know myself. We can talk for hours about absolutely fucking nothing. But I wanted to kind of like wing ourselves down, because I feel like we've talked about the state of the character, how the character relates to the health of the game, how people view the character, at least from your guys' experience, and how you guys view the skill ceiling and the skill floor. So I wanted to go ahead and wrap the conversation up. But before I get out of here, I just wanted to know if there was anything left that you guys wanted to say to the people watching on the YouTube, and if there were any like last minute thoughts you wanted to interject into the discussion.
Anyone want to go first?
Sometimes Dead by Daylight can be really frustrating. We've talked about even us as Chucky knowing that the game is frustrating, but I think it's important to note that those problems are with the game and not the person behind the screen, and we should keep our frustrations pointed at the game itself and not the players behind it.
I was just going to add, stop DCing against characters you don't like. Like, I get it, it's your 20, you paid for the game, you can do it, but like, if it's every now and again, sure, and if it's for health reasons or phobias like Plague or Old Clown, I get that too. And to be fair, some people have a deathly fear of dolls, so that I also get. But you're not gonna learn, like, it's one thing to hate a character, it's another to completely dismiss them. And I think that's where a lot of my anger comes through. Also, like Ghost said, there's a person behind the character. A lot of people are playing Chucky because they enjoy him, not because they're trying to make your day bad. I shouldn't be reading vile comments in my chat or in my comment or in my YouTubes all the time, every other day that I have to delete, making me feel bad for even existing, for wanting to play a character I like.
Real. I just kind of want to bring up that, like, just in general, like, MMR in this game, not the best. And I feel like a lot of people make their judgments based on because sometimes it could be rough matches where the survivors are newer, and it kind of puts Chucky in a light where he's overpowered XYZ. I feel like that's where a lot of people's opinions could come from. But then I'll leave it there. And just MMR in general in this game is kind of non-existent. For example, David, however you say your name, I'm sorry. I feel like because then he started testing Chucky because he wanted to see how easy, quote, it was to learn him in a day. And, you know, I don't know about you guys, but when I pick a killer I haven't really played, like I could feel that the survivors are a little bit newer, a little less experienced. So I feel like that's not a fair judgment. You really do need to put in a lot of time on the character to kind of like judge it correctly, if that makes sense.
No, that makes perfect sense. I haven't played Trapper in 6 months, and I guarantee you these first 3 days I go back to playing him, I'll probably have really easy matches for a minute, and it's same of any character I haven't played or never played. My first few days are just going to be kind of slaughter fests, it feels like.
Quick plug on something I'm doing. I don't play the game on Steam. I play it on Windows Store because I'm a weirdo. So my MMR on Steam doesn't exist. In a couple weeks, I'm waiting for the event to kind of chill out a little bit. But in a couple weeks, I'm going to be playing against new players on Chucky. And I want to see what happens. I'm curious how good or bad it's going to be.
You're going to make them quit.
Well, I'm too hooking everybody. I'm going in with no perks, no add-ons.
Okay. Oh, interesting.
I'm going to be fair about it. I'm curious how they, in general, play against the character.
Oh, that's really interesting, actually.
And I do look forward to that. So yeah, everybody watching on the YouTube, of course, let us know your thoughts down below. And if the three of you would like to join me in thanking our channel members listed on screen now, if you want to find out how to become a channel member today, get awesome perks like seeing videos early, merch discount codes, and more, then please click that join button down below. You can find all three of these beautiful people's links in the description down below, so you can check them out and you can get your own questions in about what you might have to do with Chucky, or just enjoy their presence, whatever you want. I love you guys so much. I'm sure the three of these guys do as well, and we'll see you in the next one. Need more Kaiser in your life? Well, I've got you covered. Check out my second channel, The Kaiser Extras, where I upload full gameplays, stream compilations, me reacting to your Dead by Daylight clips, and more. We also upload a daily short with all the greatest clips from stream. We'll see you over there. Link is in the description.